channel. My name is Christian and this is Soul Divine Truth. This is all about truth, all about separating truth from fiction on my channel. And I know it's been a while since I've uploaded or even recorded a video, probably about 2 years, but I just had a baby last year. So over the past year, I just really wanted to focus on being a mom for the first time. But now that he's a year old, it's really time for me to sort of get back into the swing of things, and that includes making videos and other business endeavors as well. So what really inspired me to do this video was all this crazy shit that's happening in the world right now. Like, it's actually blowing my mind. And I feel that there is a very distinct line in the sand when it comes to what's truth and what's fiction, as far as like what you're seeing in the mainstream media. And most of what you're seeing is not actually giving you the full picture of what's truly going on. And so that's what I'm here to talk about. I'm going to show you and discuss some major topics that might be considered controversial. So if you're the type of person who would rather, believe in fantasies and fables, or if you're not really the type of person that's interested in hearing about controversial topics, this is probably not the video for you. But if you are someone who enjoys the topic of political stuff, current events, truth, disclosure, and even aliens as a huge segment of my video, then this is definitely the video for you. I talk about a lot of deep topics that some might consider to be conspiracy, but actually is not conspiracy at all. Actually, because every event that has happened and taken place in the last 3 months to 70 years has happened for a direct and well-designed purpose, and so it's not actually conspiracy. Everything I'm going to talk about and discuss in this video is an absolute fact and is credited by well-respected people who are trying to get the truth out to as many people as possible. And that's exactly what I'm doing as well, because the truth is, it is time to wake the fuck up. Excuse my language, but it's time. It's time to start talking about the uncomfortable truths and start thinking for ourselves, as well as making massive, radical, but positive changes so that way we can evolve as a species. So the first thing I want to talk about is I was recently introduced to a new term called polycrisis. And what does that mean? Well, so I was just watching a video by Redacted, which is a fabulous channel that I watch on YouTube. And they recently did an interview with John D'Souza. He is a former FBI agent. He's retired now, but he served for 25 years. And he brought to the attention of the viewers of this phrase called polycrisis. And if you haven't heard of it yet, then you definitely want to listen in, because it's important to understand kind of what we're dealing with lately and why all of these crazy events have been taking place, like all these train derailments and toxic chemical spills and so on and so forth. And so I'll clip in the video for you, but it's really important that you have an open mind when you listen to this, okay?
Davos thing in Switzerland, that we are facing polycrises. And these unelected group of globalists that want us to have this, next round of disasters, next round of crises that they can control and manipulate us. What is their goal? What do we expect to see? You've been right on many accounts on this. So what can we expect to see over the next coming months?
Well, we can expect for this policy of polycrisis to keep going and keep expanding. Polycrisis should be trending on Twitter. It should be everywhere. It is a term that means basically a large series of attacks in many different areas coming forward against the United States in many different areas. Cyber attack, climate crisis, pandemics, economic collapse, all at the same time. It's basically just being attacked on multiple fronts with multiple mass casualty events, and with also the most important part, with no resistance or attempts by national, local police or forces and authorities to try to protect the public or to investigate any of these attacks. That's a very important component. These things can't go forward if there's any investigation. So that's why we have been seeing all of these railroad attacks, all these railroad derailings and the dumping of these toxic chemicals into our atmosphere. There's been no investigation. We haven't had a single FBI person step forward and have a press conference hey, we're getting to the bottom of these railroad attacks and the dumping. No, there hasn't been.
No.
Not
No, in fact, we heard
or
from the head of the
leadership.
FBI last week, just a few days ago. Depending on when you're watching this video, we have the head of the FBI talking about China, the China problem, the concerns about China. So nothing about American problems. We're all about China.
So, as you can see in this video, he gives a lot of really good information about everything that we're seeing, not only in the last 3 months, but the last 3 years, really since COVID happened. And it gives you an idea of why all of this stuff has been happening. And we've all become so desensitized to it that most people don't even realize everything that's actually going on. But to give you a few examples, obviously we all know what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, with the 50-car train derailment. And also too, do you even realize that there were 50 toxic chemical spills just since the beginning of 2023? I mean, that's crazy. Here's one, just for an example. There was a spill at a factory outside of Philadelphia that sent thousands of gallons of chemicals into the Delaware River. One of the chemicals in the spill, butyl acrylate, which is also a chemical that was on the train that derailed in East Palestine. So Trinseo, the company that owns this chemical plant, estimated that about 8,100 gallons of this latex finishing solution flowed into Otter Creek, which is a Delaware River tributary about 12 miles upstream of a treatment plant that provides drinking water for more than 1 million people in and all around Philly. Like, are you kidding me? And that's just one out of 50 more chemical spills just like this. And that's just within the past 3 months. I mean, it just blows my mind. Or another one to mention is all of these mass school shootings that we're hearing about, or what's going on in Tennessee. People who are trying to help and be an advocate for these poor families who lost loved ones in the school shootings are being ferociously silenced and dismissed even from their jobs. I mean, it's honestly just insane. I don't want to go into every single event that's happened recently. You guys watch the news, you know what's going on. But I just wanted to name a few that kind of go hand in hand and coincide with this whole polycrisis thing.
Anyone within half a mile of it to leave. Now state and federal agencies are getting involved, including the Environmental Protection Agency. And that's because they say the black smoke erupting out of the inferno is highly toxic. The facility...
Another one of these polycrises that is definitely worth mentioning is, have you guys noticed all the shiny silver objects in the sky lately? Have you noticed a lot of news and media coverage about these so-called UFOs or UAPs in the media lately? It's everywhere. If you haven't heard of it, you're probably sleeping under a rock. I don't know. But over the last 3 months, there's been a lot of conversation about aliens and UFOs and so-called UAPs. But I really hate that term, honestly. And I'll get to why in just a minute. But so the biggest question, are aliens and ETs real? Well, obviously they're real. But are they really a threat as our mainstream media is attempting to portray? Hell no. No. So aliens or ETs, they are not the ones who are operating these so-called UAPs in the sky lately. Like what you're seeing all over the news, that's not actually UFOs. And why am I emphasizing the word UAP? Well, because UAPs are human-made. Okay, first of all, a UFO is an alien craft, alien-operated, alien-driven, alien-made. But a UAP, however, it's really a reference to UFOs, but they're not actual UFOs. UFOs, like I said, are alien-operated. A UAP is not. What you're seeing in the mainstream media right now, that is human-made, and they are part of a covert black budget operation that started around the 1940s. But obviously, this is all very highly classified, and that's why the main population and even most of the government isn't aware of this. Only certain factions or high-level officials who are sworn into these types of covert operations, like they're the only ones who are part of this. So, in other words, black budget, covert operations, aka humans. Most aliens and ETs or extra-dimensional beings are actually benevolent, and they are assisting in our ascension, and they have been since the beginning of time, since the beginning of humans, essentially. And they're not here to start a war. Despite what you think, and despite what the media is trying to portray, like they're really trying to put it into our minds that these ETs might be a threat, given the fact that they're like shooting them down, but they're not evil. I mean, there are some ET races that are not of a higher vibration, but we'll get into that on a separate video, but those are not the beings that we're discussing here. The organizations that are involved with these covert operations are part of the world's most dangerous criminal enterprise. I know this sounds like a really bad conspiracy movie or something, but you know, it's not. There's been ongoing discussions in court about this issue for the last probably 30 years or so, but of course being done behind the scenes, not in the public eye. But to put it into perspective how severe this is, Dr. Stephen Greer, who I'm a huge fan of, I've been a part of his whole disclosure project and CE5 and everything, which I'll get more into that later, but he's always my go-to when I want to know more about anything involving alien or ET disclosure, UFOs, anything of that topic. Like, this man has made it his life's mission for the last 30 years to get disclosure out, get people to see the truth of what's really going on. But anyways, to put into perspective how severe this is, Dr. Stephen Greer says, quote, "Forget the mafia, forget the worst terrorists you've ever heard. Forget all of that. This organization is way worse and more lethal and more vicious." So obviously, this is a very delicate issue, but it is an existential threat to national security and world peace. Not the UFOs. I mean, like the secrecy behind these covert operations is really what I'm referring to. And you're probably wondering, well, if there's this whole group or faction of people who are doing such illegal things, right, then why aren't they being arrested? Why aren't they being exposed? Well, there are many people who have successfully come out and exposed these black budget projects and who even joined the Disclosure Project created by Dr. Stephen Greer and who can live to tell about it. But there are many others who have attempted to expose this issue or who have attempted to be a part of the disclosure movement, but unfortunately they lost their lives because of it. So anyone who tries to talk about this oftentimes are put in a position where their lives or their family's lives are being threatened. And it's actually, there's a term for this called wet works. So a lot of people stay quiet because there's nothing that protects a whistleblower when you're dealing with the most dangerous, highest level of security clearance, CIA, or any type of organization like that. These people are not messing around, okay? Like, when it comes to what lengths they will go to keep a tight lid on these operations, you know, they'll do anything by any means necessary. And what do I mean by that? Or what are some of these operations that I'm referring to? Well, for one, the biggest one is, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm actually this is the truth. The biggest one is their plan to stage a fake alien threat or a fake alien invasion. And it's called a false flag situation. And this is something that Dr. Stephen Greer often talks about, as well as John D'Souza, who I was talking about before, the former FBI agent. So this is very real. This is something that's been going on and has been talked about for decades, but especially by Werner von Braun. On his deathbed, he said to his assistant and friend, Carol Rosin, I mean, his dying words were literally a direct warning about this. Okay, and so for those of you who are probably wondering or thinking to yourself, okay, so fake alien attack, okay, really, when is this supposed to happen? But the truth is, this has been going on for the last 70 years. It started 70 years ago and it's happening right now. Everything that you're seeing in the mainstream media right now and in the news about all the UFOs in the sky, like, why are we shooting them down? Because it's meant to put the idea in your head that this is a threat. Another thing too, so around 1953 to 1954 is when the deep state and these covert projects were being developed, and when they finally mastered anti-gravity aircraft and created these highly advanced technologies in which they started staging and simulating alien abductions. So what does that mean? So around 1953 to 54 is when we were finally able to create our own version of a UFO. In other words, UAP. Stephen Greer says that about 90% of these acclaimed abductions are staged by humans through a simulation. Like, that's terrifying. So people who think they're being abducted by aliens because it looks, seems, feels, smells real, and their experience is incredibly real to them, 9 out of 10 times is a simulation by humans and is a total psyop. That's actually terrifying. So especially the most traumatizing cases. It's part of their game of psychological warfare. And there's been a few people that have come forward with this, such as there's a CIA, an ex-CIA director who's a part of Stephen Greer's disclosure team. And he has in his possession a document from 1985 stating that they have been committing horrible atrocities all throughout Latin America and Argentina, staging alien abductions because of the, quote, psychological warfare value. So obviously this is a very delicate and sensitive topic, as you can see, as far as like the secrecy around this topic. Of course, if this ever were to get out, or if like the major part of the population were to find out that most of these experiences of alien abductions, or even some people who have been impregnated by aliens, were just a staged simulation. But there are some highly respected individuals who are coming forward and fighting with their lives to get the truth out to the public. But obviously this has to be done properly, and this sort of thing takes a lot of time. And like Stephen Greer, who founded the Disclosure Project, he made it his life's mission, like I said before, for 30 years to engage with the public on this issue. He has like thousands, if not more, other people in very high places who have joined him on his mission, such as high-level government officials, celebrities, ex-CIA directors, and other ex-CIA agents, just to name a few. Or John D'Souza, he's another one who I keep mentioning too. He was in the FBI over 25 years before he retired. He even worked on cases involving paranormal incidents as well. He wrote a book about this called The Extra Dimensionals, in which he makes some very profound predictions about the topic of aliens, including this whole false flag type of situation as well that I've been talking about. Like, he's right up there with Dr. Stephen Greer as far as trusted people who speak out and expose many aspects to these sort of covert projects. So, are you still skeptical about what I'm talking about? Well, let me ask you this. Why do you think all of a sudden, lately, now they're just starting to talk about UFOs in the media? I mean, doesn't it seem like strange and totally suspicious that for the last 70 years it's been deny, 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 and then up until just recently, over the last probably 3 months, and now all of a sudden these UFOs or whatever in the sky, like now they're a threat? And you know, aliens and ETs, they are not, like true aliens and ETs are not a threat. These covert operations, those are the threat. These fake simulations are a threat. The false flag situation, that's a threat, but not actual extraterrestrials. And that's the point that I need to make, because when you're watching the news and you're seeing all this footage of these UFOs in the sky and the government or whomever, the military trying to shoot them down, obviously that makes you have this idea in your mind that that's a threat, but it's not a threat. You need to understand that this is all part of a very, very dark agenda that has to do with psychological warfare. The truth is, we have been making peaceful and respectful contact with the extraterrestrials who are here to help us behind the scenes. And this is, you know, what you're seeing, that this is just not them. They are not attacking us. The deep government, they know exactly what's going on. And to be honest, they are actually involved and making contact and working with many different races of aliens right now, and they have been for a very, very, very long time. So another thing to consider, at one point, ancient civilizations considered aliens or extraterrestrials to be gods. They were revered as gods, and they were in very close contact with them for thousands of years, in which these gods have gifted these civilizations many types of advanced technologies. Like, why do you think ancient civilizations were so advanced? Think about the ancient Sumerians, the ancient Egyptians, the Mayans, Atlanteans. Like, why were they so advanced? But think about the pyramids. Why haven't we been able to replicate that at all since then? And we're talking about thousands of years ago. They were able to do this, and we can't do it now with the technology that we have. What's the one thing missing in that equation? back then they respected these aliens as gods, and now we don't. I mean, you can look through any type of ancient text and hieroglyphics, and there you will find literal symbols of UFOs and types of aircraft coming in from the sky that is depicted in almost every ancient culture around the world. But, you know, it's a video for another time. But Billy Carson he has his channel, Billy Carson Forbidden Knowledge. He talks about this all the time, and we'll talk about more on that in a separate video. But so the point is, we have the technology that appear to look like UFOs when in fact they are just human operated so-called UAPs. And like I've been saying, it's been highly classified since the 1940s and 50s. Even President Eisenhower, he said in the mid to late 50s, before he left office, he says, beware of the military-industrial complex. Because even he knew the threat of these big covert operations and what they pose to the world. Still don't believe me about this false flag situation or the fake alien invasion? Well, this has already in fact happened before in history. So this is something that I found, and I'm quoting from the channel Redacted. This is an incident that happened in the 1940s. So, quote, 2 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, unsubstantiated reports suddenly started proliferating all over New York about approaching aircraft that were coming in and that caused panic over some sort of an invasion. People were obviously freaking out. Stocks plummeted all across New York City. And where did these reports even come from? It's a mystery. But it doesn't matter because it really had its desired effect. And later that evening, President Roosevelt led one of his famous fireside chats, and he told Americans that we were declaring war on Japan. And then a few days later, so in February 1942, to keep the heat on the war and to keep the American momentum, the U.S. government suddenly released a ton of weather balloons. Does that sound familiar? So this was a very well-known case that most of you probably know of as Battle Los Angeles, making it seem like possibly Japan or even some aliens were attacking us. Obviously the people were, looking to the president, oh, please help us from these invaders. And there were newspapers even saying searchlights and anti-aircraft guns combed the skies during alarm. So it's like, obviously if you're shooting these aircraft, like people start to believe that it's an actual threat, regardless of the fact that it was a total hoax.
Against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object...
So I'd like to pose this question. Why is it our first initial reaction just to shoot down these so-called UAPs that they're seeing in the sky, these alien UFOs anyways? Like, not only during the Battle Los Angeles incident, but also recently in the last 3 months, all the UFOs that they're seeing in the sky, their first reaction is, oh my God, it's a threat, we gotta shoot it down, right? Why is it that we are so hostile right off the bat? Automatically, let's go to war, automatically become violent. Like, this is a tale as old as time. This alone should be a sign that this is all fables and lies and fear-mongering at its best. We're not actually being attacked, and it's all part of this whole fear campaign. This is not a time for blind faith in everything that you see in the news. I want to tell you, like, open your eyes, open your mind, and ask yourself, when you watch the news, does it make you feel afraid? When you hear about the things going on in the world right now, do you feel any sort of level of fear? Whether it be the UFOs in the sky or the possibility or threat of a World War III, does that scare you? Because if it does, if you do feel any sort of level of fear, then that means they are getting exactly what they are going for. They're trying to scare you on purpose, so that way we do go to war, World War III, or so that way we do spend trillions of dollars to fight these so-called alien invaders. It's really all just some level of propaganda. And this is just the world we live in. They have raised us and indoctrinated us to not have courage. They breed us into this cult of safetyism, to not know our own true power and to stay asleep and be easily controlled, being easily manipulated, because they know that when we finally wake up and realize the truth, that we will have the power, because we do have the power. We've just been asleep for so long that most people don't even realize or understand or fathom their true potential and their true power that we all have within us as a collective. We need to have a new peace movement, and this is something really important for me to talk about, because this is how real change is going to happen. It's the power of the people. Think of the civil rights movement, for example. It was not the politicians that had the initial idea to make the positive changes that happened. No, it was Martin Luther King who helped make this happen by inspiring the people to rise up and fight for the rights and freedom as humans. And that is exactly what needs to happen right now. We need to understand that real changes need to be made, and understand what the real threat is. And it's not what you're seeing on the news. That's not the real threat. The real threat is the secrecy, these covert operations, and these simulating alien attacks, or the false flag situation, or all these poly crisis. That is the real threat. The real threat against our personal freedom, or being able to let us handle the truth. We can handle the truth if we were just given the chance to hear it. Anyways, what kind of changes am I referring to? What kind of changes need to be made in order to help us evolve as a species? Well, number one, we need proper disclosure on the truth behind aliens and ETs and the highly advanced technologies that have existed since the 1940s and 50s. But obviously, as I've been saying this whole time, have been viciously suppressed to the public. We need to bring that forward to the public, talk about the truth behind all of this stuff. But even more than that, as Stephen Greer talks about, no more oil, no more fossil fuels, no more petrodollar, no more gas, no more coal, and no more oligarchs who are controlling us through utilities and energy. Because what we need is free energy, or in other words, open source strategy, or quantum vacuum, or 0-point energy. This is the type of fundamental energy and power sources that would properly run this planet. And as Stephen Greer talks about, this is based on the science and technology of the great Nikola Tesla. And this is stuff that was also proven in the 1950s. The technology is out there, but of course it's been classified. But physicists have described this energy as this, quote, if you have a coffee mug, the amount of space that you have in that coffee mug has enough potential power to boil off all of the oceans of the world. And Nikola Tesla says this energy is everywhere and that we can tap into it. When we tap into it, we are tapping into this field of energy that can be converted to electricity or thrust. It is everything in between and everything within. Think of whatever chair or couch that you're sitting on, etc. It's occupying the volume of space, and then when you get past the molecular to the atomic level of this, and then the subatomic, so it's very, very potent. And it's been mastered for about 100 years. It's an infinite energy field, and this phenomenon has been empirically observed since the late 1800s, but physics has actually proven it by Nikola Tesla in the 1920s. So a century ago, think about that. That's exactly why we call this the lost century, because it really has been the lost century. We have not evolved at all as a species, as a collective species. Why do I say that? Obviously I know people are gonna argue and say, look at our medical advances and we have an iPhone, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about medical advances or surgical types of advances, or even a freaking iPhone. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about consciously, spiritually. This whole time, this past 100 years, it has been their very strong intent to keep us in this little tiny box that they keep us in. And the reason why everything is happening right now and things are exploding is because it's time to come out of that little tiny box. We're not meant to be there forever. It's time to finally evolve as a species. So by using this infinite quantum vacuum power of space to use energy to get what Stephen Greer talks about is to help us get to a level 1 civilization, which means through peaceful resolution and not destroying the environment, okay? So this whole idea of the open source strategy or quantum vacuum or 0-point energy, free energy, this technology is out there. This has already been done, but this has been suppressed for 100 years. This is obviously the lost century, as many people call it. Tesla made great strides in the 1920s, but obviously that was all suppressed for a reason. That dynamic has not changed. We have been suppressed as a civilization, as a species. We have been suppressed emotionally, spiritually, and consciously because, obviously, of these corrupt, fascist, criminal, industrial interests, as Stephen Greer says. But he also states that this is clean, that this is safe, this is humane, and this is sufficient in the long term, literally forever, with zero causes for concern. No more pollution. And this is the only way to end this upcoming war, because there's nothing to fight about if there's no more coal, no more oil, no more nuclear power plants in existence. If you don't understand what I mean by free energy or quantum vacuum energy, like this is, think about outer space. The vacuum of space, that is what we would be using to use for energy. So it's obviously unlimited, and it doesn't cost $1. It doesn't cost anything. It's not something that can be patented, and that's not something that people can make money off of. So obviously there's a reason why it's been suppressed. And so, like, think about it. 25 years ago, so a quarter of a century ago, we were already at a dangerous, threatening level of damage to our biosphere. It's obviously much, much worse now. This is for not only our Mother Earth, but for ourselves. We need to save our planet if we want to continue living here. And not to mention that this is also true freedom for every single person and human on this planet. This is the only way that we can evolve as a species, as conscious beings, because it's either that we evolve, we choose to evolve, or we get annihilated, whether it's by ourselves or when Mother Earth finally puts her foot down and fights back, or by the ETs who have been monitoring us and monitoring our evolution progress since the beginning of time. Since humans first began, they have been monitoring and assisting and watching us behind the scenes. So anyways, one way or another, we need to take action, and we need to start talking about this. This stuff needs to happen. We don't have a choice but to fix this ongoing issue. This is the one big change that we need to make. So earlier I had mentioned about a level 1 civilization, and I just want to touch on that. Like, what does that mean? A level 1 civilization means evolving beyond the point where we are as humans right now. So highly, highly advanced races of extraterrestrials, in other words, aliens, such as the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, the tall whites, even the grays, like they all have advanced far beyond where we are right now. They have evolved as a species, evolved consciously, and that's why they are so highly advanced and why they have become multi-dimensional beings. So what would it mean if we had free energy? What would it mean if we were able to finally get to that point and we started installing these technologies and these machines that would give us free energy? Well, it means that every single home, business, car, village in Africa would all be able to have a device that would generate all the energy that they would need for a modern civilization. There's no cost, and there's no refueling, and there's no radiation, no pollution, no nothing. So let's talk about this. Let's start this conversation. And I know most of you are probably thinking, like, this is too much pressure. I'm only one person. What can I do? I have no power, or we have no power to make this sort of change. But that's literally the indoctrination inside of you that's talking. That's the part of you that's been raised to fear stepping into your power and stepping up to your government. If the people had power, like I said before during the civil rights movement, then we have the power today to overthrow the way that we've been living for the past 100 years and finally evolve. It's time to finally end this paradigm that is clearly no longer working for us anymore. So we need to take action before it's too late. There's just like one thing. So Obviously, as you can see, with history repeating itself and not really evolving and not really changing anything, all this suppression that's been happening over the last 100 years. And in a recent video I was watching by Stephen Greer, and I felt like it was appropriate to add into this video, but he made a statement and I absolutely love it, because he was referring to our society for the last several centuries. And he says, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. This is obviously a quote by Albert Einstein, but it's true. What we are doing, it's insanity. It truly is. So, final thoughts to ponder. How about holding our country accountable? How about holding our elected officials accountable? How about we hold ourselves accountable? Because we can do so much more than we even realize, and we do have our voices, and we do have this power, this collective power that we need to use in order to fight and make this sort of change happen. So, anyways, this has been so nice making this video again and getting back into the swing of things. I've really enjoyed this, and I definitely want to say stay tuned, because if you enjoyed this, then you will definitely enjoy some of the projects and discussions that I have coming up over the next few weeks and few months as well. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being a part of this, and I'm wishing you all the best. Peace and love, everyone. Take care.